Good morning.
Good morning.
So here's a secret way that you know you haven't had enough coffee. You want to hear it?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You log on to TikTok, waiting for the show to start, and realize, oh my God, I'm in the wrong app. So that was preceded by pouring water into the coffee pot without adding coffee. So it's been a day so far. So good morning, everybody. How are you? All right, we got a lot to cover. So I want to actually start. I'm going to do another little short, like 1 minute video on the theme for this week because just like it's so complicated right now. And I want to distill it down into something very simple. The pathway to innovation is paved by flagstones of love. And the more we innovate, the better our ability to love each other. The source of innovation is our desire to amplify our ability to nurture not only ourselves, but each other. It's the summary of the week. So if you want to stop there, hang up and just start thinking about how can you amplify and focus your attention on your life, and trust that as soon as you do that, all the answers to whatever it is you need to innovate in your life will show up. People have been asking me a lot, what is the secret sauce behind the growth of your business? Because I've been in the same business now for 25 plus years. I'll say the secret sauce is I wake up every morning and I say, how can I serve love? How can I be a beacon of love for the world? I think the answers and the next right steps always reveal themselves in response to that question. It sounds woo-woo and kind of mushy, but nonetheless, it works. So I want to invite you all to really play with that particular question, because truly, being in service to love always reveals the next right innovation. And the next right innovation always increases our capacity to serve love. So that is all. You now go have a great week. And I will. But instead, for those of you who want to go deeper, let's explore what's up in the transits. So you probably have been feeling a little bit like the energy's been picking up. Maybe you're beginning to feel a wee bit like there's more momentum than you've been experiencing since the beginning of the summer. We kind of had a really gooey summer, right? And good news, this week both Mercury and Jupiter go direct after a series of many major planetary retrogrades. It still leaves us with, I think, 2 more planets in retrograde, but slowly but surely we're getting unlocked from feeling stuck. So this retrograde cycle has been calling on us to dream big and explore our personal and collective narratives. And I'm not going to go deep into that because I have been saying this for months and months and months and months. And you might be feeling a little bit this week like it's spring. And it might feel like spring because we have a full moon in Aries. And it might feel like spring because we're starting to feel like, we're getting unstuck a little bit. But I do want to remind you, and this is a Minnesota warning. And Kristen, you relate to this. Jamie, you too. But some of you who live a little bit further towards the equator, you might be like, what is she talking about? But here in Minnesota, that burst of warmth that initiates the beginning of spring is often accompanied by rain, surprise cold snaps, lots of mud. I always call spring mud season, and days when you're really confused about whether you should wear a parka or short sleeves. I think that's probably a really good metaphor for the week. So you've probably been feeling like you've been running in place with bungee cords connecting you to the path. So we've been pulling and struggling to break free from these bungee cords for the past few months. It's like we're wearing a vest and we've just been hooked into multiple bungee cords. And of course, we've been many of us, maybe you haven't, but I will say I certainly have been straining hard against the pressure and the pull, only to discover that I've just really been running in place. Maybe you relate to that. So, as these retrograde planets begin to release their hold on us, these sort of energetic bungee cords are being popped off one by one. And of course, it's decreasing the tension And we run the risk, as we're being released, of being rapidly liberated from their hold and having to fight the counter effect of the release in order to prevent ourselves from losing control and flopping straight onto the ground on our faces. So the answer here, the anecdote here, is be deliberate. so that if I was going to distill the whole reading down into, or the whole report down into, a single phrase, be deliberate and serve love. That's it, Kristen. You could just put that out on Instagram. Be deliberate and serve love. That's the theme. So, we have to take a big step back, and again, because that's what I like to do. Take a big step back and really look at what's going on, what's been going on the planet for the past couple of years, because this cycle that we're in is so huge. And if we lose perspective on the hugeness of what's happening, then we get lost in the tiny little ebbs and flows of how the energy shifts on a weekly basis. So the more aware we are, the more we can utilize the power of our release from the past as creative momentum, instead of, being sprung loose and sprawling in an ugly, unattractive way onto the ground. So the planets bring us the information stream for our evolutionary program. And the energy of the planets is expressed through the 64 gates. So each planet brings its own theme, and it highlights various gates in the human design mandala. And this is really basically how the transits work. The planets, in essence, really are highlighting the big themes that are part of our soul curriculum, and are really giving us an opportunity to explore how does consciousness evolve through us. So each planet, of course, has its own influence. And of course, each rotation of the planet measures a cycle of expansion with its own theme. And of course, the Earth itself has its own cycle of expansion on an annual basis when it travels around the sun in a calendar year. Now, the Earth has a second cycle. And that second cycle is much bigger than the little, annual cycle. And it measures actually the gradual shift in the orientation of the axis of rotation. So this rotation completes a cycle approximately every 25,772 years. Yes, we are quantifying today. So you can listen to the numbers, or you can just go blah, 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 and hang on and wait till I get to the main part. So we call this cycle the precession of the equinoxes. And so within this major Earth cycle, there are 6 epochs broken into 8 smaller cycles. So you may want to take notes. So 25,772 years, each small cycles. Each cycle lasts, is 6 epochs, 8 small cycles. Each one of those smaller cycles lasts about 400 years. So these global cycles bring the bigger themes of the evolution of humanity, and they are in essence the plot outline for our growth and expansion. And of course, each of these global cycles are expressed through specific human design gates. So as the planet evolves, it goes through global cycles, and global cycles set the stage for our evolutionary story. It's the background theme that humanity has to master as part of evolution. So the plot outline for our evolution of the last 400 years has been illuminated in what we call in human design the incarnation cross of planning. The configuration of this cross gives us big clues about what we need to complete and master, both personally and collectively, if we're going to be ready for the next cycle, which starts in 2027. So we're like at the end of this major 400-year-long cycle. That's huge, right? And we are moving towards a brand new cycle that is actually highlighting next, and starting in 27, the incarnation cross of the sleeping phoenix. So the first theme that the cross of planning holds for us is actually rooted in the channel 4037. That's the channel that connects the will center, that's the little triangle on the right-hand side, to the emotional solar plexus. That's the big triangle on the right-hand side. That's called the channel of administration in quantum human design. The mastery of this channel gives us the ability to make sustainable agreements that create the peaceful administration of resources and energy. In other words, it's the place where we make decisions about how to feed, shelter, nurture, take care of each other and ourselves in a sustainable way. So we've been exploring this theme. It also, by the way, is a place where we can create, it's an element of creating personal sovereignty. So it's also the place where we consciously choose what relationships and what agreements are we making, are we getting into. So we've been learning a lot in the last 400 years, especially the last 200 years. We've been learning a lot about how do we create sustainably, how do we consciously attract into our life what we want, how do we make conscious choices around what we attract into our life experience. And if you're familiar with the more abstract aspects of human design, you'll know that this is the place where we calibrate based on our sense of self-worth what we attract into our life experience. So we've been in this really deep materialistic place where we've been measuring value, including our self-worth, by numbers, right? We measure how many zeros do you have in your bank account. I'm trying to buy a house right now. My whole life is being measured by my credit worthiness, which is, God, don't even get me started on that. If you want to learn more about me and my credit worthiness, you can read my human design newsletter tomorrow because I'm ranting about it because it's such a bogus thing. But we are measuring each other and ourselves by numbers. If you're a woman, we've learned to measure ourselves by our waist size, our pant size, our bra size, what the scale says. We measure oftentimes, especially again, as women, our value is measured by our age, although I don't think that's exclusive to women. We measure things by numbers. How many years of education have you had? Blah, 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 numbers, numbers, numbers. And as we come to the end of this global cycle, we're starting to really say, looking at our value through the lens of quantifying with metrics that are numerological, meaning measuring our value by numbers, is dumb. It's not working. It's setting us up to be in competition with each other. And it really doesn't make sense on a planet where, at least right now, the way we are interpreting the resources available on the planet, they seem to be rather finite. And if we're going to all be under the same sun and the same sky and eat from the same earth, which we are, we have some serious challenges ahead of us if we're going to continue to measure ourselves with these numbers. Because it just doesn't work, right? It creates a scarcity / competitive mode. And in a world where, I don't have to go into the deep, dark, scary details, but in a world where we could essentially obliterate each other with a push of a button, those of you who were children in the 80s, you know this really well, right? Or the 70s. We don't, it's a dead end model of creativity. And so as we come to the end of the cycle, we're all going, hey, you know what? This model, great in the sense that it taught us how to gain more control over our life and the trajectory of our life. This is what we've been learning the last 400 years. If you were born, 400 years ago, you didn't have that much control over right? You married who you were told to marry. You served whatever lord you were serving or whatever, right? You didn't have that much control, and at least in the Western culture. So, as we've moved forward towards the end, we've learned to become more sovereign over our life path and our life direction. And our ability to determine our life path and our life direction is directly tied to not our credit score or our credit worthiness, but our love worthiness. How much love do you have for yourself? And how much love do you have for others? And how much love are you creating? And how much value are you creating based on your own sense of self-worth? How much good are you willing to allow yourself to receive? And how much good are you willing to create in the world? So, this is a huge, huge deal. And as we come to the end, really looking at, okay, this is what we've accomplished this 400 years. As a species, we've really moved forward into this brand new way of creating in the world. And we've outgrown the old way of creating in the world that's very materialistic. We've outgrown the way of creating that involves simply moving the mud of the planet. I don't think that part's going to go away. Maybe. I don't know. But I think that what we are learning as we emerge into the next cycle is that, A, We're all inherently valuable because we exist. All life is inherently valuable because it exists. And that means each and every one of you on this call. And B, we're learning that if we want to really create sustainably, if we want to amplify the quality of life for all living beings who deserve it on this planet, then the very first thing that we have to do is align the energy with sufficiency, enoughness. And we have to emotionally create from a place of faith, which is basically creating from a deep understanding that you are enough and enough is promised to you. And when you trust in that enoughness, then that enoughness manifests, because that's how energy organizes itself and comes into form in the manifest world in a state of coherence. We live in a cosmos that is regulated by the theme of coherence. We literally live in an orderly universe. Chaos theory says eventually we shake out of the chaos and organize ourselves. It's sort of the implicit bias in the way the cosmos works. And that unifying field of coherence, which, by the way, the heart exists in a state of coherence when it has a healthy sense of well-being and value. I personally believe that that state of coherence is ruled by the energy of love. So the more we surrender to that energy of sufficiency, the more we align with the energy of love, and as I said in the very beginning, not just love, but consequently the innovations necessary for us to put that love. By the way, love is a verb. It points towards the sacral. It's not just a feeling, it's a verb. So we have to live it. We have to actually do it. So, okay, that's our big overview of where we're headed. So, as I said, in the final thrust of this cross of planning, we're redefining what's valuable. We're redefining what we value. And with a planet that's facing a crisis in sustainability and resources, we're learning that value is not measured in things or numbers, but in quality of life. So global warming and other challenges facing the planet are potentially, actually, I think, great equalizing events, because we all live under the same sun. We all breathe the same air. And it serves us all to ensure that our planet survives and is sustainable. Okay, so what good are material resources if the planet itself is dying? So we got to fix it, right? These past 2 years have been the dying gasp, if you will, of material consciousness. We are finishing up the tasks assigned to us by the cross of planning, meaning we're having our old stories that tie our self-worth and our perception of our value to material good destroyed and dismantled. This disruption of this old story affects everything, personal inner dialogue, to the way in which we structure society and the workings of our world. So the more we experience disrupted stories, and of course that's been the big theme, right? The more we experience disrupted stories, something we've been contending with on a grand level, right, these last 2 years, the more we get kicked out of our old narratives. Okay, so cycles of disruption always bring us into a strange state that is oftentimes called liminality. Is a fancy word, right? So I like to call liminality the void. I think it's a lot easier to say. So when we are in the void, which is where we are, we no longer, we're no longer the people we used to be. We're not who you used to be. Okay, which means sometimes we have these longings to go back to the old ways, but we really can't. We really can't. And if you ever really do deep studies about movements, what creates a movement in humanity, right? When you look at the studies that talk, what is the root of a movement? And there have been lots of movements in the world, and not all of them have been great. A movement is rooted in a gathering or a group of people who perceive that somehow they have lost something. So, when you look at some of the movements happening on the planet right now, and again, large groups of people gathered around common ideas, that a lot of what's happening is we're gathering around this sort of sense of loss that's rooted in a longing to go back to the old ways. But, we really can't. That world, that pre-COVID world, and that narrative really doesn't exist anymore. And so the task at hand now is to move forward and to harness momentum. And consequently, as a key element of giving ourselves momentum, we have to harness a new story. We have to tell a new story. We have to cultivate a new identity. And that identity has to be big enough and juicy enough to call us forward. So, this is really, it's so important to think about this, because most of us are taught, and I'm just, I still catch myself with this, and maybe some of you relate to this. Most of us are taught to not have a dream or a vision that's bigger than what you think is possible, right? There's a certain implicit bias around something that's impossible. And, if we say, I want to live in a world of peace, or I want to have a criminal justice system that is equitable and genuinely compassionate and helps people heal from trauma, or I want to have an economy that is rooted in creating well-being for everyone. I want to solve the challenges to global warming. All of these thoughts, oftentimes we don't give these aspects of our future narrative a whole lot of credence, because we're like, well, I don't know how to do that. That's not possible. Science says that's not possible, right? And if we don't start crafting stories that are seemingly impossible and big enough consequently to call us forward, we're just going to sit in this void. And so the past few months, the planets have been screaming at us, hey guys, you got to have a bigger story than what you're telling. You have to let go of the idea that it's possible, because the impossible will never manifest if you don't at least give it words first. If you don't at least entertain the dream first. If you don't crack the door open to creating the energetic frequency by entertaining the possibility that this could maybe actually happen, even if you don't know how, that if we're not living there, we're stuck in this void. And it's a really uncomfortable place, because we can't go back to who we were before, but we can't move forward because we don't have a dream that's big enough. And we're sitting here plodding through the numbers going, well, that's not possible, that's not possible, that's possible. And the reality is, the planets have been saying, give up this whole possibility lie. It's all possible. If you start the process of codifying it with language, building the infrastructure of the new world by telling a story that's big enough, enticing enough, juicy enough, compelling enough, rooted deeply enough in sufficiency and love to call you forward. That's the task at hand. And what I see collectively, even in our beautiful, enlightened community, is a lot of people who haven't been willing to dream. A lot of people who have let the despair of the loss of the stories that didn't work, and the stress of it, and the excuse of it, if I can gently say that, keep them from giving themselves permission to think about what else is possible. What else is possible? So, it is up to us, with this amount of awareness that we have, with this understanding, that the first thing that has to happen is we have to build the energy to pull us forward, and that we are awake enough and aware enough to understand that, and that energy is such a high frequency state that energy actually influences way more than how we can influence with sticks and rocks and guns and whatever in our hands. That if we can occupy that prayer field of expansion and possibility, we can begin to find the material evidence step by step by step in front of us to begin to construct that dream in the tangible world. You guys have probably heard me talk over and over again about NASA and the dream of going to the moon. When somebody first came up with the idea that we should go to the moon, it wasn't a possibility. In fact, it was a fantasy, right? And yet, enough people continued to hold that idea and created critical mass around that idea to where that idea grew legs. and the evidence and the science and the knowledge of how to put a rocket ship together and get it to the moon and back ultimately manifested. Why can't we do the same thing with the idea of building an abundant, sustainable, just, peaceful world? We can. We actually can. But we have to at least believe that it's possible. And we can't believe that it's possible if we don't start entertaining the new ideas. Okay. Boy, I'm really ranty today. I obviously have not had enough coffee. Okay. All right. So these past few months have been kind of like an intensive retreat that's had the purpose of encouraging us, believe it or not, to really explore what new stories do we want to tell about our lives and the future of the world. So as we come to the end of this retreat cycle that we've been in, we're being called out and called forward. All right, so we're being called out and called forward. We actually are going to start doing some of the work, if you will, of actually beginning the process to manifest this world, right? So, again, we've sort of entered the no excuses part of the cycle. So, I was informing this of my family this morning. We've entered the no excuses part of the cycle. Do your work. So we're actually really starting to process this next part of the cycle of building the scaffolding of what's next. But even though this stalled energy is lifting, we're still going to have to deal with some. Also with, a large majority of the world that's still wanting to go back to how things were before. So this contrast between those who cultivate wisdom, innate knowing, and a direct connection to life's intelligence, that's you, and those who feel that what they've lost or that their stake in the control of the future is too tenuous, might make it feel like there's still a gap between us. But this gap can be closed. And we're going to eventually discover that true community doesn't necessarily come from commonality, but from the sum total of the diversity of its members. By the way, that is not my thought. That is the thought of my 12-year-old at dinner. So she got really mad at her school teacher because he said, community is based on people, is created when people have things in common. And she said, that's not true. Community happens when we find commonality amidst our diversity. So if we're going to lead the way into the future, we have to first individually embody everything that we're seeking to build. This is really the no excuse part. So really, if you don't hear any of my ramblings and this, which means what we have is we have to get out of any parts of our karma that are causing us to be victims or victimizers, less than, blaming, lack of love, lack of self-love, any of those parts of our stories where we're sitting a little bit in our feeling sorry for ourselves. And that's okay. You can do that periodically. Just don't make it a lifestyle. That any place where we're doing that, we have to stop. Because we have to personally, each and every one of us, embody what we're wanting to build. We are leading by imitating the future. Okay, so we are literally imitating, if you will. If you think maybe it's like putting on a disguise or a Halloween costume, right? Put on that Halloween costume of, I live in a world of abundance and sustainability and peace. That's my life. That's my costume. I'm going to live it. Because when we really embody it, then a force field of influence that calls other people into it. And then before you know it, you look up and you're actually not pretending, right? So today, willing to continue to look at where our past conditioning is holding us back and possibly tainting our forward momentum. So let's talk about the sun and the earth today. All right, so the sun starts this week in the gate 32, the gate of endurance. We are mastering the awareness of what needs to be done to make a dream a manifested reality. And of course, we do this by setting the stage. We're preparing, we're getting ready. And the gate 32 says we have to be patient and trust that once the stage is set, and you have to set the stage, you can't avoid that part, the timing is going to unfold as needed to serve the highest good of all. So we're really learning to really take our divine inspiration and turn it into readiness. And that's a little bit different than manifesting, right? It's ready. You're ready to manifest. So the shadow of the gate 32 is the fear of letting failure, or the fear of failure, to cause you to avoid preparing what you need to do, right? So we think, oh, we're going to fail. It's going to be too hard. It's going to be, scary. I'll never get it right. And in response to that, instead of preparing the way, we avoid getting ready. And of course, if you avoid getting ready, it never happens because you're not ready. So you can kind of basically pre-fail, right? It's like failing in advance. And then you have total control over it. So we have to give up that dynamic. That's what the 32 says. And of course, the 32 also says that, if you're trying to overcompensate for this fear and not waiting for the right timing, and you're pushing too hard or too fast or too long, then you're also at risk for burnout. So really the call here is for us to get ready and then align with right timing. And, you can't control timing. You just can't. It's too complex. And if we look at it on a quantum level, there's too many factors that we can't control that go into timing. So the only thing we can do is influence timing by being ready. And the earth, the earth brings us a code for what we need to master in order for us to become aligned with endurance, the gate 32, and readiness. So that this gate, the earth highlights the gate 42, the gate of conclusion. And as I said last week, it just reminds us that if you really want to be ready, the first thing you have to do is get rid of all the old crap you haven't finished dealing with. All the old conversations you need to have, all the stuff you need to clean out, all the stuff you've been putting off and procrastinating, you got to move it out of the way because you have to create space for something new. And that space for something new allows you to get ready for what's next. But you can't do it if you've got old stuff hanging on behind you. So be honest about your desk, your garage, your closets, etc. The stuff you've been putting off in your email inbox, get it done so you have more room to get ready. The sun moves to the gate 50, the gate of nurturing, on Wednesday, bringing us another fear to explore on our path to mastering courage and mastering our forward momentum. So the gate 50 brings us the lessons to help us remember that we have to first nurture ourselves so that we have more to give others. This is the energy of nurturing, and it represents the intuition to know what others need to bring them into greater alignment with love, and to teach and share what we have to increase the well-being of others. Okay, so this is a giving, loving, nurturing mama bear energy. And with this energy, we want to take care of everybody else, but we can't do it if we're not taking care of ourselves first. Okay? The earth in the gate 3, so the code here for how do we love better, the earth shows us in the gate 3, reminds us that to gain momentum, to innovate. We can't do the same thing over and over again, right? We have to change. And as I said, we can't go back to the old ways ever. But here's the kicker with the gate 3. You also can't throw the proverbial baby out with the bathwater. To innovate, we have to really focus on what is working, what is going well. And we have to continue to build upon that. To share and give if we're growing the good by building upon it. Okay? And the key here is gratitude. And I know we all hate that, right? Bleh, I don't feel grateful today, right? But actually the gateway to evolution. And if we simply spend the week being grateful, we'll be fine. It'll be a good week, okay? The fear of the gate 50 is the fear of failing your responsibilities and obligations to others. And some of us, especially those of you who have this as a soul theme in your chart, you might experience this theme either as guilt or sometimes resentment. Okay, so sometimes we feel it as guilt, sometimes resentment. And certainly this is one of the places where codependency lives in the chart. And it's essential when we're learning about this energy to remember to assess whether a situation at hand is actually our responsibility, or if the job at hand, the task at hand, is to commit what is oftentimes the most loving act. And it's hard, right? Especially if you feel things deeply. So sometimes the most loving act to commit is to allow someone else to handle their own stuff. It's especially true, those of you who are parents, you know that sometimes you have to let your kid fall down, right? And really have the opportunity to explore, how did they fall down? Why did they fall down? What caused them to go splat on their face? Because if we keep running around and putting pillows under them, they don't get the opportunity to explore their strength and their courage and their resilience. But man, it's hard. I'll say as a mama, I know that that's a really hard thing to do. So, it's a really important part this week to explore, what old patterns and habits do you need to release in your relationships? And sometimes remembering that letting go and letting someone handle their own stuff is the greatest gift we can give them. It's a vote of confidence. I know you got this. I know it's hard. You can do hard things, right? There is, of course, a risk with this energy when it's at play. So there is a risk that we're overcaring. It's also a risk that we're holding on to fixed values that can be rigid and harsh. So this is, the archetype of King Solomon lives in the gate 50, right? And the shadow of King Solomon is a king that is so rigid and that he makes harsh rulings because this is what the law says. The 50 has built into it the willingness to break the law if the law is unfair, right? So we're really having to explore, what rules and values are we regulating ourselves with? And are we going to stick to the rule because it's a rule, or are we going to be willing to release it if it's not serving the greater good? That's all. So, and it's an interesting energy, because it's definitely one of the places in the chart where war and fighting can live, and definitely with this kind of violence, when we hold on to fixed values that are restrictive and exclusive. So if we're going to create from a place of lack, or if we're going to fail to focus on what is working and steadfastly that we have to go back to the way things were, then we're not going to be able to evolve in a healthy way. And it's going to be a lot more challenging. And okay, deep breath here, because the sun is highlighting this energy. And of course, the tension between progress and conservatism, with the week on Wednesday in Aries, squaring Pluto in the gate 61, the gate of wonder, and opposing Mars in the gate 32, the gate of endurance. And, I certainly will say, as we get to the end of the week, I do expect some tension between those who are ready to forward and those who are hard to go back. And by the way, before we judge that tension, this is true for whatever side of the fence you fall on, this tension is an essential part of evolution. We absolutely have to have people who don't want to move forward, who want to go back. We need that energy to test us, to make sure that the direction in which we're headed is building upon what already works and isn't some random experiment that may or may not serve the greater good. So really, I think as we look at, and there's a lot to unpack here, so I want to be really mindful of some of our divisiveness, some of the things that cause us to be divided in our culture are there because of algorithms and because we live in a world where information is very robotically curated, if you will. And so if you don't actually work hard to really get information, you might not be seeing the big picture. And I do want to encourage you all to make sure you're getting your information from good sources. And some of this divisiveness is essential for evolution. We always come to a point of crisis where there's a push and pull between the past and the future before we can be released to that momentum. The trick is, when we get released, to not run so fast in response to the release that we fall flat on our face, but to instead, as we go along this process of being released from this tension, to consciously and carefully build the scaffolding of a narrative that can hold and guide and steer our forward growth. Okay. With the nodes highlighting the channel 3420, the channel of power and charisma, in traditional human design, and which I like to call the channel of responsive power in quantum human design. We're still working through our personal and collective power struggles. We're not going to find the solution until we work towards building on values rooted in love and expansion instead of hatred and contraction. On Saturday, we're coming to the end, you guys. On Saturday, we move into the sun, starting to highlight the themes of Scorpio. So even though we have momentum on the horizon, we are definitely still swimming deep in the oceans and currents of the underworld and trying to find the flashlight to shine on our shadows. And here's the bottom line: be kind. Even though you might feel like you're being released from some kind of energetic bondage, use this time to ride the slipstream of the photons of faith. We are not entirely out of the dreamy state of this growth cycle, and it's going to start to feel better for sure, but you have to remember to take conscious, deliberate action. It's not time to react. We need support, courage, honesty with ourselves mostly. Don't how you've been victimized or somebody else is responsible for your incidents or your success or whatever. We really have to take back ownership of those pieces from within ourselves as best we can. And that I'm really saying that with a deep understanding that our collective structures are inherently exclusive, racist, and divisive. So we also have to know those things and continue to work towards eradicating those regulations and those aspects of our collective story so that we become more inclusive and just, because that's part of the new story. And we have to look at, of course, narratives where we blame each other. Again, take some time in the mirror to look at your old narratives. Heed the call to remand yourself the hands of life's intelligence, which is organized by a principle that moves us towards coherence and love, so that we can trust that we'll know what we need to know when we need to know it, and all is well. So you guys have a really good week. That's my summary for the week. Wow, I finished early today. That's good. So it's been a while since we've had time to talk at the end. So we can take a couple of questions or statements this week. If you want your hand, we'll bring you up. So, okay. Good morning, Paige. Nice to hear you again. How are you?
Yeah, good morning. I'm fine. Although what I'm working with now is around hearing and energy and congestion in my right ear.
Oh, so yeah, I feel you. So I would lovingly and gently say that anything that has to do with auditory circuitry is related to transformation and mutation, Paige. So maybe
I hit a big change point?
Yeah, oftentimes. Or it might be that there's something you need to slow down enough to really hear. And that might be more intuitive hearing versus, physical hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my thoughts for you today, this week.
Thanks.
And Paige, I wish you good clarity in your hearing. I hate that when your ears are stopped. Super annoying.
Yeah.
So, good. Awesome. Thank you, Paige. Anybody else want to hop up, say, ask a question about your chart? Come play with us.
Hi.
Hi, you.
I just wanted to say hi, and I love you guys, and I miss being here.
I know. It's good to hear you. I miss you too.
Oh my God, I'm so glad I caught this. I thought it was at 7 and I emailed Kristen. Kristen is going to be like, oh my God, all these emails.
No,
I was emailing her like, is Slack still a thing? I was like so confused. I've been out of the loop. So I'm glad to be back in the energy, and I'll figure it out with Kristen how the hell I can figure out what's going on. But this was so great to hear, Karen. So many things resonated, and Exactly. I definitely don't want to go back to the way it was because that's not evolving. So I loved everything, and I'm so glad I caught the majority of the report. And I love you all, and it's so good to be back in the vibes with you all.
Love you, Iman. Yes, and message me, or I'll check my email later, and we'll catch you up.
I'm gonna stalk you this whole week, Kristen, and I apologize in advance.
I love you. We'll catch you up. No worries.
Okay. I have to say, love you, Iman, and happy belated birthday. I was going to say too.
Thank you, Queen.
What were you going to say, Karen?
I was just going to.
I love you more. Thank you. Love you. Mwah.
Heidi, how about? Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am well, thank you. This was my first time in this room, and I was just going to ask for a quick recap on Monday, Tuesday. Like, just what did you say? Because I think I popped in when you were talking about Wednesday and onward. So I just was curious what to expect in a nutshell today, tomorrow.
Okay, so today and tomorrow, in a nutshell, this is a great time for you to start taking care of everything you've been procrastinating and putting off, and anything that you think you need to have in place to be prepared for moving forward. So it's a good time to clean out your closets, clean out your email inbox, clean up everything that you need to take care of from the past, and get yourself positioned to be ready to move forward. That's the nutshell.
You'll be able to go back and read and listen to the whole report, though, after the fact. If you go to KarenCurryParker.club, you'll be able to catch up on everything that she said in the beginning.
Oh, yeah, I forgot to say that. Yes, if you want to get a copy of the report for this week, or listen to the recording, or watch the video, go to KarenCurryParker.club, and you can get all the information there. So, and we've got some fun and exciting things. We keep checking back there. We've got a lot of really fun and exciting things coming up in the next couple of weeks. So do tune in, do sign up, stay in the loop of all the stuff that we're doing. We do a lot of stuff around here. So it's good to have written reminders so you can keep up. Good morning, Sharon. How are you? Can you hop out, Sharon?
No, I was just still not figuring out how to unmute.
Yay, there you are.
God. Well, I'm definitely still in some retrograde mode.
One more day.
I'm feeling it. I actually was feeling. Let me just start. I want for once not to come, not to come on with like, oh my God, everything is horrible, because I do feel it. And I've been seeing some really kind of nice movement towards like the education that I've been gaining this whole year, kind of becoming a dividend, if you will, right? Where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm turning a corner. So I will just say this. My in-laws are here for 2.5 weeks, and starting Saturday, I am driving 6 hours to be on an oceanfront, amazing little duplex in North Carolina for a whole week of just me.
I am so proud of you. Do you know how proud I am of you for doing this?
I can only imagine. And I said, I'm like, well, they're coming, so $2K for me to go and just staying with my self-worth around this has been such a beautiful lesson. And I mean, I will say that doing all of that, everything is so lovey-dovey, and me and the hubby are like super lovey, sexy, like it's all work. It's like I just had to say I deserve it to myself, and going through like waves of whatever response came from outside or judgment, or am I spending $2,000 on me? No, I'm spending $2,000 because I want my kids to get their grandparents to be here for 2.5 weeks, but I'm a manifester, bitches. Can't do it. Can't be for 2.5 weeks with everybody together in the family soup. So this is happening. And so I do have a question though as well.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, and I mean, it's totally off, but I'm working with your, your quantum design evolution guide, the calendar thingy, and I've noticed that, for example, the full moon now, and you said it too, is you have it at gate 3, but my 64 keys software, I don't know if it's because they're in Europe. For example, this week they have it at 51, and not only that, they have it in 51, one in the 6th line, which is my Chiron wound. So I'm actually, I was like, I feel like that's correct. Like, I feel this is the right full moon for me, if that makes sense. But do you have anything any advice on why this is the disparity, and how do you calculate the full moon?
That's a good question. I'll have to go back and look at it. I know that, those two gates are they're right next to each other. So it may just be we're measuring the timing of the moon differently. So I use the timing of the moon. I don't know. I'll have to go back and look at it. I mean, it just may be that we're looking at the timing of the full moon a little bit differently, because both of those energies are both Aries. They're both very close together. I mean, they're right next to each other. And I would say that, whether you're looking at the 51 or the 3, they're both initiating energies. And so thematically, it may be the 51, it may be the 3, but really what we're seeing is a push towards initiation, a push towards new beginnings, if you will, and springtime energy. The thing is, the full moon highlights the earth, and the new moon highlights the sun. So that, when we're looking at the matched pairs around the mandala, that's the 50 is always paired with the 3. That's my interpretation of it. It's been the way I was taught by Ra, but there may be a different interpretation of it that I'm not aware of.
And I think also with the moon just changes it goes through all the gates so quickly. So I guess I just wonder, is it like midnight, or because the moon changes every couple of hours, right?
It does. And if I look at the ephemeris, right, and if I look at the let's remember. If I look at the full moon happens at 14:56 GMT. Okay. So, and that's usually what I use to measure that. So
interesting. And I'm the more the merrier. I will contemplate 3 and 51.
It's actually very. That's interesting. I'm actually wondering if there's an error there, because there's quite a big difference in time between, because the 51 shows up at 14:59 the day before. So there's a whole 24 hours difference here. So I'm wondering if there's not an error. Because
they're always kind of behind, and they're in Germany. I think it's of course. I'm trying to look right now. So that's 64 keys, which I love their software for many reasons, and mostly because it's interactive and it's great to do readings when you can share the screen and show and go into the lines. Although they're translated back from English to German back to English, so some of it is kind of comical.
That's actually how all of Ra's teachings were. Ra taught in English, and all of his written material. He never wrote anything. All of his written material was translated to German and then translated back into English. So it's a weird ritual in human design.
It's interesting. Well, I compare it to the Rei Ching, which is, I guess that's the oral history, because it sounds like a lecture that was transcribed. Right, so that's me. I'm just, I'm a 5-1, so my 1 just digs deep into these things. But anyways, I was just wondering about that. When do you? Is it when the moon rises? When it's like when? What's the calculation for full moon?
It's calculated by when the moon is actually full. So you go to astronomy, there are specific metrics around what is the full moon, meaning there's no shadow on the moon at all.
Got it. Okay, so maybe it seems to me like you're more meticulous, and I'm going to go with you, obviously.
I would never, ever qualify myself as being more meticulous. That is a gross, erroneous assumption, Sharon. Just
okay, I'll go with the Germans. The Germans are more meticulous. How about that?
But I actually think there's a well, I don't know. There's a 24-hour interesting thing happening there, and astrologically, that's kind of doesn't make sense. But I'm sure there's a reasoning behind it, and I don't want to dispute that.
Got it. But I guess then, and I don't want to take up more time, but I was wondering if the moon does fall on your Chiron wound, like the full moon, that sounds like a pretty rich invitation.
I think anytime anything falls on your Chiron, it's a pretty rich invitation. And certainly, our Chiron, which, represents our wounded healer. And when I look at a chart, I consider Chiron to be the maturing point in the chart. Activated.
I'm sorry, you got cut off. You said the maturing point?
Maturing point, yes. It's a maturing point. So when Chiron gets activated, it's always going to bring us an opportunity to explore what limiting beliefs or experiences do we have that are holding ourselves back from stepping into our maturity.
Oh, that's great. That sounds like a great way to celebrate the full moon.
Always. And of course, full moon is about releasing and letting go. So it's what old wounds do you need to let go of to step into the full expression of who you are.
I got my marching orders.
March away and send me a full report and maybe some pictures from the beach, Sharon.
Oh, I will. And also, just a quick request, and then I promise I'll stop. My beloved student and client and friend, Sarah McLean, is undergoing surgery right now for removing a rare cancer. She's an amazing generator. She's kicking ass. This is not her first rodeo, but I just was hoping we could all, send her healing, good vibes of healing light or whatever you guys feel comfortable sharing.
What is her name again?
Sarah McLean.
Okay, so let's all take a second and see a vision of Sarah McLean, fully recovering from surgery and cancer, experiencing the depth of vitality, a deep connection, and a reconnection to her purpose, and a pure joy of life, and rapid healing, and healing for all those who are impacted by her life and her well-being.
Amen.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you. And we'll continue sending her love all day today. So
thank you so much, Karen. Love you. Love you more.
Love you too. All right. You all have a wonderful, wonderful week. We'll be back next week. Just make a little note. We've been bumping this up and doing this early because Jamie and I have had a really full schedule for the last 4 weeks in our Quantum Coach program. Starting next week, we still will have a really full schedule, but we will go back to our original time of 9 o'clock Central Time for our Clubhouse presentation. So 9 o'clock Central Time next week. So you'll get an extra 30 minutes. And again, KarenCurryParker.club gets you connected to all the stuff you might have missed and new and juicy stuff that we continue to post. Follow us on Instagram, Karen Curry Parker, Facebook, Karen Curry Parker, TikTok, Karen Curry Parker. And I hope you guys have a fabulous, fabulous week. Be well. Take care. Thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Kristen. Bye, you guys.